This happened with my colleague Jerome about 8 years ago. We were both around 28 at the time, both career-focused and still figuring out parts of ourselves we'd never really examined. Jerome and I had been working together for about 2 years. He was the FBI's top cybersecurity analyst, and I was Colonel Maurice Williams, assigned to a joint task force on digital terrorism threats. Jerome wasn't just brilliant at what he did, he was the kind of guy who commanded respect without trying. Sharp, methodical, and ridiculously composed under pressure. He had this quiet confidence that made everyone in the room listen when he spoke. Jerome was about 6 feet 2 inches with an athletic build that came from early morning runs and weekend basketball games. His dark skin seemed to absorb light in the most striking way, and he had these expressive eyes that could shift from intense focus during briefings to genuine warmth when he laughed. At the time, I wasn't entirely sure of myself. I knew military life inside and out, discipline, leadership, tactical thinking. But when it came to personal relationships, especially anything beyond what was expected of a career officer, I was still figuring things out. Looking back, though, if I had the chance to rewind time, I would have been braver. I would have acknowledged what I was feeling sooner. Jerome was the professional colleague. That's how I saw him. He was the guy who would brief me on security protocols or explain complex algorithms while I tried to keep up with his technical expertise. I'd sit there listening, pretending the way he rolled up his sleeves when he got passionate about a problem didn't distract me. I was good at maintaining my professional demeanor, or maybe he just never picked up on anything because he was focused on the work. To me, Jerome was untouchable, this brilliant, composed analyst who had everything figured out. I thought any feelings I might have were completely one-sided. But what happened that weekend changed everything. It was during a joint operation in Virginia. We'd been working around the clock on a critical case involving compromised military communications. After successfully neutralizing the threat, our commanding officer gave the team a long weekend to decompress. Jerome had rented a cabin about an hour outside D.C., and when he mentioned he'd be there alone, working on some personal coding projects, I found myself asking if he needed company. The cabin was perfect, secluded, peaceful, with a view of the woods that stretched for miles. Jerome had arrived earlier and already had his laptop set up on the dining table, multiple monitors displaying lines of code I couldn't begin to understand. When I showed up with takeout and beer, he looked genuinely happy to see me. "Didn't think you'd actually come," he said, helping me carry bags inside. "Figured you'd want to spend your weekend somewhere with actual civilization." We spent the evening talking shop at first, but gradually the conversation shifted to more personal things. Jerome told me about growing up in Detroit, how he'd gotten into computers as a way to escape a rough neighborhood. I found myself sharing stories about military academy, about the pressure of living up to family expectations. As the night wore on, we both had a few drinks, not drunk, just relaxed enough that our usual professional barriers started to come down. We ended up on the couch, the conversation flowing easier than it ever had before. Jerome had this way of listening that made you want to keep talking, and I realized I'd never really had someone pay attention to me like that. At some point, exhaustion caught up with me. The couch was comfortable, and Jerome had thrown a blanket over both of us while we watched some old movie. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was having this incredibly vivid dream. In it, Jerome and I were still on the couch, but everything was different. He was looking at me with this intensity I'd never seen before, and then he was kissing me. Soft at first, then deeper, his hands in my hair. When I started to wake up, I realized the dream hadn't been entirely a dream. Jerome was there, closer than he'd been when I fell asleep, his arm around me. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could feel his breath against my neck, the solid warmth of his body against mine. I spun around, and suddenly we were face to face. Without thinking, I shoved his arms back until his shoulders hit the wall. His eyes widened in surprise, but a playful grin quickly followed. "Army man," he murmured, breathless. "I've always fantasized, but the real thing is so much better." I pressed myself hard against his crotch, grinding slowly, deliberately, just to watch his reaction. His lips parted, and I whispered against his ear, "We Army men are always ready for duty. Want to take a ride?" Clothes fell away in seconds, ripped and tossed aside. His hands grabbed at me desperately, but I caught his wrists and pinned them above his head against the wall. The heat between us was unbearable. I lowered myself over him, my lips, my body tracing down, discovering what he had hidden, what he was keeping just for me. It was insanity. I didn't recognize myself. Every principle I thought I stood for, every rule I had lived by, crumbled in that moment. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. His breath grew rough, his body straining beneath me, urging me on. We lost ourselves in the frenzy, sweat dripping, bodies colliding, hearts racing like gunfire in the night. The room filled with heat and the raw sound of us, like nothing else existed. Time blurred. The world outside disappeared. The night refused to end. He pushed harder, growing, pulsing, until I was sure I couldn't hold on anymore. And then, together, at the same instant, we gave in, crashing into release with cries that shook the silence like thunder rolling down a mountain. The aftermath was quiet, but not awkward. We lay there for a long time, neither of us saying much. Jerome's arm stayed around me, his thumb absently tracing patterns on my shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I should probably apologize," he said quietly. "I came over to check on you and I don't know what came over me. You look so peaceful, and I've been fighting feelings for you for months." I turned to face him, studying his expression. There was vulnerability there I'd never seen before, a nervousness that was completely unlike his usual composed self. "Don't apologize," I told him. This was incredible." Jerome's expression shifted, relief flooding his features. He admitted this was new territory for him too. He'd always been focused on his career, never really allowing himself to explore these feelings. But there had been something about working so closely with me, seeing me in high-pressure situations, that had awakened something he hadn't expected. The next morning, the dynamic between us had shifted completely. Jerome made coffee while I sat at the kitchen counter, both of us stealing glances and sharing small smiles. When he handed me my mug, his fingers brushed mine and lingered. "So," he said, leaning against the counter across from me, "am I under oath now, sir?" "At ease, soldier," I replied in a laughing manner. He slowly came near me and whispered in my ears, "You look like you need to be served, Colonel." His kinky attitude reached something wild in me. He sat on my lap and our lips met in a passionate way. His hands were all over my body, and I started to grab him just to let my whole body feel the euphoria. He lowered his hands to my lower parts and started to squeeze my manliness. Now we were in the kitchen aisle, and he immediately bent over saying, "Now you know how to conquer me, so come and take your place." He was very authoritarian, and as someone who constantly gives orders, this was driving me crazy, but in a good way. The magic became the prehistoric. Wild touches, hot kisses, subtle cries, and instant neural exchanges between our bodies felt like we were at the very beginning of this life song. I climbed on him just as a bull. The tides grew between my legs until we both cried with roaring sounds. Everything was over now, but the momentum of this wild experience made us laugh very hard afterwards. After that weekend, everything changed between us. We started seeing each other regularly, finding excuses to extend work meetings or grab dinner after long days. Jerome had this way of making me feel completely at ease while simultaneously challenging me to be better. Not just professionally, but personally. We kept things quiet at work, of course. Military protocols and FBI regulations weren't exactly friendly to workplace relationships, especially ones that crossed service lines. But outside the office, we were inseparable. Jerome would come to my apartment after work, and we'd cook dinner together while he explained whatever project he was working on. I'd tell him about tactical training or share stories from deployments. Those evenings were some of the best of my life, just the two of us. No rank, no protocols, just Maurice and Jerome. The relationship lasted about 2 years. We were good together, really good. We understood each other's dedication to our careers, supported each other through the stress of high-stakes operations, and had this incredible chemistry that never seemed to fade. But Jerome was ambitious, and when he got offered a position with the NSA that would mean relocating to Fort Meade and potentially years of classified work that would limit our contact, he couldn't turn it down. I understood. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of career move that only comes once. We tried to make long-distance work for a while, but between my deployment schedule and his security clearance requirements, it became impossible. We made the difficult decision to end things on good terms, rather than let the relationship deteriorate. That was 6 years ago now. We still exchange messages occasionally, holiday greetings, congratulations on promotions, that sort of thing. Jerome made lieutenant colonel in the cyber warfare division, and last I heard, he was engaged to a brilliant woman who works in cryptography. I'm happy for him. He found someone who could match his intellect and share his world in ways I never could. Don't forget to subscribe for more original LGBTQ+ romance.